What makes one improvised guitar solo better than another? This is a question that thousands of guitar players have had, yet it's not very easy to answer. And of course, it's worth mentioning that when I say one guitar solo is better than another, if one solo is full of mistakes and completely out of time, obviously that guitar solo is worse. However, when we're talking in the confines of no mistakes and no mistakes, how is one solo actually considered better if they're both played properly? And this sort of structure is what makes it feel like it's impossible to actually get better when you can truly do whatever you want. And it causes many players to question, if the only rules are don't play out of time and don't play sloppy, how is someone's do whatever you want better than someone else's do whatever you want? And I'm gonna try my best to explain this, but the number one thing that players get caught up on is the word improvisation. The definition of improvising is to create, perform, or respond with no prepared plan or script. And so to truly improvise is to allude to the idea that you're going to be thrown into a situation where you have no idea what you're doing until you have to know what you're doing, and then you clutch the situation. And so when you hear that concept and you relate that to music, it would lead you to believe that you should be able to get thrown into a song with zero preparation, have no idea that you're about to have to solo, and then just be able to perfectly. That would be truly improvising on the spot. And so if you have that mindset and you get thrown into that situation, you feel like it's luck to actually have a good solo. And if you see somebody else absolutely ripping their guitar neck, it's like, how are they so lucky when they're improvising over this solo section and they actually have no idea what they're doing? And of course, the truth is, if you're someone who's watching this and you do know how to solo over changes and different chords, you know that that's not the case. And when it comes to soloing over a chord progression, you absolutely do know the chords in advance. You absolutely do know scales in advance and triads and arpeggios in advance. So when it's time to solo, you have things you can pull from. And if you're hearing that as a beginner, you might be thinking to yourself, that sounds almost like cheating, like you shouldn't be allowed to do that. That's not improvising. If you have all these things that you have knowledge on and you have these things planned out and you know these things work over certain chords, that's not improvising anymore. But believe it or not, this is what every single pro player does. Rather than truly improvising with no idea of what they're doing, they have a buffet of different notes, scales, slides, different expressions, and all these things they can pull from to improvise a solo. The improvising part is having a giant toolkit of options to choose from, but then picking whatever you want when it's appropriate for the situation. An analogy that I really like when it comes to soloing on guitar is to compare a chord progression to a skate park. In a skate park, you have grind rails, kickers, quarter pipes, stair sets, and all kinds of stuff that you can skate on. And as a beginner skater, you might just kind of skate around the park and look at stuff, but you don't really use anything, but you're still in a skate park. And if we compare this to playing a guitar solo at a basic level, this would be simply like playing on the root notes of all the different chords as the changes happen. You're not doing anything fancy, and you're definitely not going to be turning any heads, but you're still doing a guitar solo. And you might do a solo that sounds like this. Now let's say you've been going to the skate park for a couple of weeks, you know where things are, you're not super confident, but you kind of understand how things work. You recognize that a grind rail is for grinding. If there's a ramp, you can jump off of that. If there's a staircase, you can try to go down the stairs or jump down the stairs. There's some stuff that you can at least think about trying out. But I need you to recognize that you're still in the same skate park. The park itself has not changed. And now that you're cruising around, maybe you try and go for a manual down a ramp, or you go for your first ollie, or maybe you get brave and try and go for your first 50-50. And when we compare this to playing guitar, this would be similar to playing the roots and the thirds of the different chord changes. You're definitely not doing anything insane, but you're recognizing that there's a little bit more texture, there's more color, there's more options for what you can actually play over the chords. And so you might play a solo that looks like this. now let's say you've been going to the skate park for a couple of months. You feel very confident with where everything is. You start doing some more intricate tricks. Maybe you start doing kick flips, you're doing board slides on the rails, you're trying to gap down the stairs, and you're feeling pretty confident with your ability. So you want to try and develop some sort of lines. Maybe something like going for a kickflip onto a rail and then going off the rail into a manual. Just something simple, but definitely still impressive. And so what you're doing at this point is developing a feel for the change in terrain. You are definitely very aware of how to use a grind rail, or how to use a stair set, or how to use a ramp. And now, as a very comfortable skater, as you approach a piece of equipment, you simply do whatever you want because you've done it so many times. As you're coming up to a rail, you might go for a 50-50, or you might go for a board slide. It really just depends on what you want to do. And so now at this point, you are improvising lines as a skater. Nobody told you that you have to do a 50-50, or you have to do a kickflip, or you have to do a board slide onto this rail. You simply just decided and pulled from your toolkit. And so if we took this concept and compared it to playing a guitar solo, this would be like playing over the changes with extreme comfort, knowing where all the important chord tones are, and then ensuring that we're playing them every single time we pass through those chords in the progression. This is the exact same as being in the skate park, and every time we come up to the rail, we use the rail, or the ramp, we use the ramp, or we go down the stairs, or whatever it happens to be. And so a solo like that might sound like this. And if you've really been paying attention, you might have picked up on something that's super, super important. And that is that the chord progression never changed. Now, why is that important? Well, just like our skate park example, you have to get comfortable with the equipment. If the park's layout changed every single time you showed up, that feeling of comfort and mastery would never actually happen. And since there is structure in the layout of a skate park, you do have the ability to actually master and then come up with crazy creative things to do in the park. And I'd heavily compare this to playing crazy fast runs, adding sweep picking, string skipping, or any dissonant diminished scales. If you don't know what's coming, you would never be able to do that with success. In order to do that, you'd have to become incredibly comfortable with the chord tones, scales, and even the notes on the fretboard. If you really want to do impressive solos, you have to know all that stuff inside and out before moving to another skate park. And also, if you know the notes on the fretboard, you can truly freestyle or improvise things that are not even scales, but you know for a fact that it will sound good. When you see players solo across the entire neck with these crazy intervallic licks, instead of trying to memorize that one particular lick, more often than not, they recognize where all the different A's are, or all the different D's are. So if they're playing in the key of A minor and they know that a D is coming up, they can pull from that, and that is the improvisation. And so, to bring it all together, if we take a look at the beginner skater, and we also take a look at the pro skater, can you really say that one person is not skateboarding while the other person is? No, you cannot conclude that one person is not skateboarding because they can't skate as well as the pro. But what you can conclude is that one skater is better than the other. But the reason that they are better is because they are super, super familiar with the park. They've fallen 1,000 times, and they also got experimental with pieces of the park. Rather than just kind of skating by and taking a look, instead they said, okay, I'm going to break down this rail, or I'm going to break down this ramp, or I'm going to break down this stair set, and try every single thing I can possibly do off of this piece of equipment until I've mastered it. And this is also something that you can do with guitar solos. If you take an E7 chord, for example, what is everything that you can play over that chord? Where a lot of players get caught up is they say it's not worth doing all that work and learning all of that just for one chord. But that would be very similar to saying, I don't want to put all that work into one stair set or one grind rail. It's not worth doing. But what happens is, just like a skater, when they become super comfortable with that rail or that stair set, when they see another rail or another stair set that is very similar, they can just transfer those skills and it still works. They still feel comfortable and their skill set is still available to them. And then when they become super nasty at skating, or in our case soloing, They simply do whatever they want. Why did they play a crazy diminished scale that had some crazy sweeps and string skipping and it went across the entire fretboard when he could have just played 2 notes? Why did they do that? Because they wanted to. That's the improvisation part. Because they could. That's the improvisation part. And so here's what I want you to do. I want you to get an A minor blues backing track, or better yet, I'll put the one I used as the example in the description. And I want you to play on this track over and over and over again and simply skate around the chords and kind of feel it out and say, okay, what can I play over an A minor? Where can I play it? What is cool that I could try and use as a trick or a lick to just try and spice up my play a little bit? What can I use? Or what about the F? Or what about the E7 turnaround? How can I use these chords and spice it up so that when I play my scales, it's very interesting, intricate, and even inspirational for myself? How can I expose, embellish, and optimize these chords to the highest degree so that it actually sounds impressive? What you're gonna find is that you're gonna be doing a lot of practicing and exploring on your guitar neck. And when it comes to soloing, you might even practice something over and over again, and it might not feel like improvising. But then when asked to play over an A minor chord progression just like this, sometimes when the E7 comes up, you'll play your diminished scale, and sometimes you won't. Sometimes you'll play the Phrygian scale. Sometimes you'll hang out on the E, sometimes you'll hit the G sharp, sometimes you'll play some tremolo picking, you'll add some bends, but that's all up to you. That's the improvisation part. But to know that you should even do any of that, you have to prepare in advance. It's just like being a beginner skater. No beginner skater is going to improvise accidentally becoming a pro by luck. They have to practice, they have to break down all the equipment and become extremely, extremely comfortable and experienced. And so the final takeaway is this. It doesn't matter if you're just playing the bass notes, if you're hitting some thirds sometimes, or even adding in some diminished scales. No matter what, you're still playing a guitar solo. And so to make this even more encouraging and so that you don't feel like you're alone, I'm also gonna be practicing over this exact same chord progression, and I'm going to post my ideas every single week. And you can take some of my ideas and add it to your own playing. And that's not cheating. That's just being inspired by another player, which every single player on earth does. If you enjoyed this breakdown, please let me know down in the comments and let me know of any other topics that you'd like me to cover. With that being said, thanks for watching.